right, good afternoon, and thank you, everyone, for braving the inclement weather as we gather to take an essential step forward in the long and ongoing fight for justice, accountability, and healing for Black America. Today, I'm deeply honored to reintroduce H.R. 40, historic legislation to establish a federal commission to examine the lasting legacy of slavery, to develop reparations proposals for descendants of enslaved Africans. It is an honor to inherit the privilege of carrying this bill forward. Amen. From Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. In my last correspondence with her, she said, "Keep working on our priorities and never give up." She was the previous House sponsor of H.R. 40 and a true giant in the movement for reparative justice. We are grateful for her leadership. We are grateful for her example and her voice. May she rest in peace and power. And we are grateful to be joined here today by her daughter, former Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter, who today, when I thanked her for braving the elements to journey here, said, "True justice is never convenient." I want to acknowledge some of our partners in good trouble in this fight. Senator Cory Booker, our co-lead in the Senate, Chairwoman Yvette Clarke of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, Congresswoman Lateefah Simon, Congresswoman Summer Lee, and the more than 70 members of Congress who have signed on to co-sponsor the legislation that was first introduced. And I want to make this point because it is Black History Month. And while there are those that are working actively, either to erase our history or to whitewash it, that I'm here in this moment to pick up the mantle of this historic legislation that has been championed by John Conyers, Congressman John Conyers, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. That was introduced more than 30 years ago when Congressman John Conyers was a co-founder of the Congressional Black Caucus. We're at a critical inflection point in America, and the moment cannot be more urgent. With Black history under attack and white supremacy emboldened, there is no better time to introduce this bill than during Black History Month, a time when we reflect on our history, our struggle, and our collective power. And I'll say, it is also not only about Black history, but it is about Black futures. More than 4 centuries ago, Africans were kidnapped, trafficked, and enslaved, forced to build this country under horrific brutality, an economy which we still benefit from today. Rice, sugar, tobacco, cotton. And even after the Civil War, emancipation, and the 13th Amendment, the legacy of slavery endured in other forms, codified in law to deny Black Americans freedom, opportunity, and dignity. And that's what brings us here today. This brutality, these injustices, these horrors were not things just happened within the culture by osmosis. They were legislated. Today, with Donald Trump and Republicans waging their coordinated and at times unlawful assault on Black folks and Black history, we will not allow that history to be erased. We will not allow it to be whitewashed. H.R. 40 is a powerful reminder of the work that remains and offers us a pathway toward truth, reconciliation, and accountability. To be clear, this bill is not a symbolic gesture, but rather a meaningful step toward repairing the deep structural injustices that continue to harm Black communities today. The racial wealth gap in America is not an accident. In Boston, my home city, the Federal Reserve counts Black wealth at just $8, compared to the wealth of white households at $247,500. Nationwide, the racial wealth gap is over $10 trillion. That's trillion with a T. This shameful reality is the direct result of generations of precise, intentional policy harm codified into our laws and budgets. And it is specifically the result of slavery and the anti-Black society that followed. From Jim Crow to redlining to mass incarceration, our government, through policies and budgets, has perpetuated and entrenched these harms for generations. The disparities that we see in health outcomes, housing, education, wealth, and more are by design. Today, our government has a moral and legal obligation to right those wrongs, and reparations are a necessary step towards achieving justice. Now, here's what the bill would do. H.R. 40 creates a federal commission an expert body charged with investigating the enduring impacts of slavery and its aftermath and developing concrete proposals for reparations. This is a pragmatic policy that is fundamentally about repairing harm and building a more just America. Whether you are in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Trenton, New Jersey, or Mattapan in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District, this is about ensuring that every person has a fair chance at the American dream. Now, I know some like to think that Rosa sat, Martin marched, and John crossed a bridge, and we were free. But we are still very much in the civil rights movement. Every day, the progress that we have fought for, the gains that have been made, are under assault and being rolled back. Donald Trump and his co-president Elon Musk and their enablers in Congress and the courts are working overtime to strip away our rights, from gutting affirmative action, dismantling voting rights, to attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that benefit Black folks and everyone who calls this country home. I think it's really important in these times that we call a thing a thing. We're in a moment of anti-Blackness on steroids, and we refuse to be silent. We will not back down in our pursuit of racial justice. And while we do the work of resistance and blunting the many harms of this hostile, anti-Black administration, it's imperative that we continue advancing an affirmative agenda for Black America and building momentum toward this critical priority. So today we have a choice. We can continue to uphold an unjust status quo, or we can work actively to disrupt it. We can allow our history to be erased, or we can actively engage in truth-telling. We can and we must confront our past and take meaningful steps to repair the harm that has been done. H.R. 40 is an opportunity to do exactly that. And now, I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am former Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter of the 18th Congressional District of Texas, and I am the surviving daughter of the phenomenal Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. May we forever say her name. It has been said that the time for justice is always right now. It is my honor to stand here with a warrior for justice, dedicated leader, and prominent legislator as we pass the torch to the Honorable Ayanna Pressley as she takes up the righteous fight for H.R. 40. This fight against injustice is personal to her and me. H.R. 40 is long overdue and even more necessary under this administration, as hate is fomented, discrimination is promoted, and code words are used to bring out the worst in our fellow Americans. H.R. 40, first filed by the Honorable John Conyers, who understood that from our nation's very founding, the enslaved of African descent were shut out and disparity was written into our Constitution. Since 1995, my mother, the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, worked closely with Congressman Conyers through her service on the Judiciary Committee and the Congressional Black Caucus. Over those years, I traversed this country to connect with advocates, activists, scholars, congressional colleagues, staff, neighbors, and friends to spread the word that H.R. 40 and dismantle rumors that it was just a check or a useless exercise. They and we know that we are nothing without a record and official documentation. You cannot right wrongs without an accurate record of those wrongs. This is what America needs. This commission is like filing a claim. H.R. 40 asks America to look under her hood and identify what has been wrong for hundreds of years and determine if there are ways to repair. H.R. 40 was a passion project for my mother, and in the 117th Congress in her judiciary hearing, she shared these words. For hidden in the corners of this nation are those of African American heritage, the descendants of enslaved Africans who have felt the sting of disparities. They continue to feel that sting. Now more than ever, the facts and circumstances facing our nation demonstrate the importance of H.R. 40 and the necessity of placing our nation on the path of reparative justice. That is what H.R. 40 is about. This commission will probe into the facts of the long-standing impact of disparities that slavery brought about in this country. We still experience them today. I wholeheartedly support H.R. 40 and was proud to ask Congresswoman Pressley to carry this bill forward. I know that my mother would be proud that generation now and next is ready to lead in the fight in the person of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She has never been afraid to speak truth to power in the face of oppressive and, dare I say, arcane efforts by this presidential administration to take us back to a time that we all hoped had long since passed. As I close, I'm reminded that H.R. 40 does not live in the past. It is about the future of my children and all children. It is Frederick Douglass saying, "What is July 4th to the slave?" And the Honorable Barbara Jordan asking America to live up to her promise. It is Beyonce and Kendrick Lamar saying, "Freedom, where are you?" And I'm proud to stand and work with you alongside the expansive H.R. 40 National Reparations movement to continue this fight. And I close and encourage you with these words sung by Cynthia Erivo in honor of the abolitionist and freedom fighter Harriet Tubman. Congresswoman Pressley, may you stand up. Take your people with you. Together we are going to a brand new home. You hear freedom calling. It's calling you to answer. May you keep on keeping on. Thank you. Now we will hear for Congresswoman Watson Coleman.
Thank you. It's wonderful remarks, and thank you, Congresswoman Pressley, for inviting me here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always taken a moment, and now it's taking a movement, and a movement can move us forward. So first of all, let me say to you, happy Black History Month. You know, from school boards to the White House, Trump and his lackeys are on a mission to erase the contributions of Black Americans, including the unpaid Black labor upon which our country was built. We won't allow this history to be erased, because when Black history is erased, when the value of the contributions of Black Americans is dismissed, it's that much easier to dismiss the value of Black lives. Black excellence scares Donald Trump. It scares Stephen Miller, and it scares Elon Musk, because you know what? Deep down, they recognize their own mediocrity. And so they're doing everything they can to entrench the racial wealth gap. They refuse to recognize that when Black America succeeds, we all succeed. When those on the bottom of the rungs of the economic ladder can climb, then the entire nation rises with them. So I'm grateful to my little sister, Ayanna, for picking up this legislation from the late, great Sheila Jackson Lee. This is Representative Lee's legacy, and we represent her legacy. She carries on, and Ayanna carries on that legacy at a time when bravery and commitment to justice are needed now more than ever. And so I am so honored to stand here in support of this legislation and this opportunity. And now I'd like to turn it over to Representative Summer Lee for her remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I thank you, of course, to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley for carrying on this legacy, and, of course, to the late Sheila Jackson Lee, who carried this with pride for so long, for her efforts, to the advocates of this movement here and outside. Happy Black History Month. Happy Black Futures Month, in an era, of course, where Black history is attempted to be erased, or whitewashed. The America we know today was built on the brutal enslavement and trafficking of stolen Africans forced to build this country on their literal backs. Despite, however, what Trump and his anti-diversity, anti-equity, anti-inclusion cronies want you to believe, this is American history. Its impact is the American status quo. It's unjust and it is wrong. No matter what anybody says, the history of America is the history of America. And acknowledging that history is not a threat to the present. Would argue that ignoring that history, however, is a threat to our future. No matter how many attempts they make to whitewash this history, the blood of our enslaved Africans ancestors can't be erased from this land. We must acknowledge that. We must acknowledge that the systemic racism that has denied Black folks the ability to thrive and to survive in this nation to this very day. We see it and we feel it every day because the barriers put up in place by our own government, because of redlining, because of predatory lending, because of inequitable funding schemes for our schools are very real. Our government, no matter who is in power, has an obligation to right these wrongs, to provide reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans, to eliminate the racial wealth gap, to uplift the black community. White supremacy is rampant in this country. Just look at the current administration and our own legislative body. They have contributed to the social and economic harms, to racial terror black folks have experienced in this country. Now, more than ever, we must acknowledge and repair those harms. H.R. 40 is one tool that brings us closer to righting those wrongs. And if we're truly going to address the racial and economic injustices rooted in this country, we must start here. I urge my colleagues, not just here, but throughout this body, to pass, to support H.R. 40, to support and pass reparations. Thank you all so much. Okay. And next we'll have Representative Jonathan Jackson. Thank you.
Good afternoon and happy African American History Month. I'm proud to be the representative from the 1st Congressional District of Illinois. Illinois has the honor of starting African American History Month with Dr. Carter G. Woodson, an African American young man that was born in West Virginia, went to the first integrated college in America, Berea College in Kentucky. From there, he went on to the University of Chicago, where he created his thesis that he had to show the truth of American history. When African Americans are distorted, deleted, this becomes propaganda, not history. He's the second African American to earn his PhD from Harvard University, so I'm very proud. Also proud to be from Illinois, which houses Evanston, Illinois, where they started the tangible effects of this reparations work, and they have gained tremendous steam. Now this conversation is taking place in New York State, Illinois, and California. As we speak right now, there are commissions in Palm Springs and Fulton County, Georgia, as well as in Amherst, Massachusetts. This is a nationwide program and it is gaining steam. This is happening nationwide. And why do I support H.R. 40? It's healing. When the truth comes out about the nation, it heals. When there's reparation, when there's been repair for the atrocities of slaveries and all of the ills that happened, this is the solution. And so I'm not here to fix the blame. We didn't create the history. I'm here to fix the problem. Yes. This solves a problem that persists in zoning and taxation and economic development. I'm also a proud co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Caucus. We are not going backwards following that of Mr. Donald J. Trump and his administration. We believe diversity is good for all. We believe that equity, equality is good for all. We believe that having an opportunity to be inclusive is important for all. So I stand on those values. H.R. 40 stands on those values. I thank the tremendous legacy of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I thank the inspiration of Congressman John Conyers. And although it's now touching ground, starting in Evanston, 100 localities across America are now picking this up. It's time for the federal government to act on this same legislation. And I am not concerned about the timing. We repair whenever its harm is due now. That's right. The second part is, it took us 246 years to go from 1619 to 1865. We are resilient. We are in this for the long haul. We will not stop fighting until there is justice.
You're here.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Lateefah Simon, and I'm coming from the California's most progressive district, in fact, the nation's most progressive district, Barbara Lee's former district, our forever Congresswoman. I was sworn in just 5 weeks ago, and I'm so honored, Ms. Pressley, that you gave me the opportunity to speak today, and your role on the judiciary is so important now more than ever. When we think about many organizers who grew up in the movement in the last 30 years, we think of Sheila Jackson Lee as our Ella Baker. Ella Baker consistently would chant, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest." She also said, "That which touches me most is that I have the chance to work with young people. They have the courage where we fail." So in this very room, you see the passing of a real torch, of a lifelong commitment to service and justice for folks who didn't receive their civil rights literally until 2 generations ago, less than 55 years ago. I'm so thankful that we're having this conversation. As an early sponsor in the 119th Congress of H.R. 40, I too am very clear. Representing Oakland in 1942, African Americans from 5 southern states begin to migrate to the West Coast. One, escaping Jim Crow South, where they found it in the Bay Area. And 2, African Americans came as they were sequestered to put bombs on ships during World War II. I come from those people. I come from Betty Levasseur, who was the daughter of a business family who owned 19 businesses that were burned down in the Tulsa massacre. We are Tulsa people. I come from my mother's maternal side, from Malvern, Arkansas, which is still a sundown town. Right now, I come from a mother who had a mother who cleaned houses all day and was not able to attend to her own, and who died because she didn't have opportunities to go to a non-segregated hospital. She left my mother as an orphan at 8 years old. So when we talk about the idea of bringing forth a bill that every member of Congress should vote on to understand, effectuate, and socialize and study how we can move a country from tyranny, subjugation, to economic prosperity, it's clear. The history is clear. I'm extremely excited that we're going to bring this bill to the floor, and we'll be able to show who really cares about this country, who really cares about the descendants of slaves who built this here Capitol. I'm so proud of the Congressional Black Caucus and our willingness to stand up in a time where Black erasure, Latino erasure, Native American erasure, Asian American erasure, LGBTQ erasure is the agenda du jour. Not only will we fight back, we will win. Today, as we announce this movement to move forth this bill, young people in this country, fear not, because this movement will grow. It will continue. Not only will you be in the streets demanding justice, you should know that we will be here in the United States Capitol as members of the United States Congress, saying what Miss Lee said every single day, saying what Ella Baker said every day, saying what Fannie said every day. We who believe in real freedom, real true equity, we will not rest. We owe not just our ancestors of late, we owe our mothers, every single member in back of me. Their mothers were born in segregation. Our mothers, not great-grandmothers, were born in policies that followed chattel slavery. But we will endure. I have no doubt. We will endure. Not now is a phrase that King said consistently, but we will endure. Thank you so much.
And now we'll hear from the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Yvette Clarke.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and I proudly represent New York's 9th Congressional District, which is located in central and southwest Brooklyn, and I'm also the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. On behalf of the entire CBC, I'd like to thank my esteemed colleagues, Representative Ayanna Pressley and Senator Cory Booker, for their leadership in reintroducing H.R. 40 legislation to finally establish a federal commission to address and explore reparative measures for the lasting impact of slavery, systemic racism, and racial discrimination in Black America. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize and thank our former House colleague and co-lead on H.R. 40, Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter. I want to thank her for her leadership and for joining us today, as well as our colleagues who are arrayed here. It is an honor to be here today in support of this important and transformative legislation, which the CBC has championed for decades as part of our unending mission to improve the lives of Black Americans in this country. As we celebrate Black History Month, I am also reminded of those who have led this legislation on behalf of our caucus for many years. From Congressman John Conyers, who first introduced this legislation in 1969, to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who led its reintroduction in the last Congress with over 130 co-sponsors. H.R. 40 is a powerful reminder of the challenges we must continue to confront in our country and the long path to reconciliation and accountability for the injustices that have for too long been a detriment to our communities. I can think of no better time to bring forward this legislation than now, a time when we are seeing the erosion of our fundamental rights and freedoms. In just the past few years, we have seen the conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court roll back decades of precedent in race-conscious college admissions. We have seen a persistent and coordinated assault on our right to vote and efforts to dismantle the Voting Rights Act of 1965, one of the most effective pieces of civil rights legislation ever enacted in the United States. We have seen efforts to distort our nation's history and erase Black history in our schools. We have seen efforts to strip away the tools of economic opportunity that allow people to get ahead and build generational wealth. And in just a few weeks of this administration, we have seen President Trump unleash a tidal wave of executive orders to demonize and roll back diversity policies in the federal government while turning over our federal agencies to a corrupt and unaccountable billionaire. We owe it to the communities that we serve not only to stand in the breach against hate and bigotry from this administration, but to also put forward real solutions. Solutions that lower costs, solutions that close the Black-white wealth gap, solutions that make buying and owning a home a reality, and solutions that rectify long-standing issues that make the American dream unattainable for far too many Black Americans. The CBC remains committed to building momentum for this legislation and keeping it at the forefront of our national agenda until it is passed. I want to thank again Congresswoman Pressley for her graciously picking up the mantle on behalf of our dearly departed friend and colleague, the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. We've got work to do in this nation, and H.R. 40 for our communities is the North Star. We expect that our colleagues will understand and will participate in making this legislation law. With that, I yield back.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for hosting us today. In the many postmortems of the 2024 election, there are establishment voices in your own party that have said that race-conscious policies are bad politics, and we have seen a retreat from elevating these issues. What is your message to fellow Democrats who would say that now is not the time to be talking about reparations for Black Americans?
Well, Dr. King reminds us that the time is always right to do what is right. And Coretta Scott King reminds us that freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. You know, I'm very clear about the fact that the path to justice is not a linear one. And so we're here to do that work. And I think it's important, while we are actively blunting the coordinated and unrelenting assaults from this hostile administration, that we are actively advancing an affirmative vision for this country and for this party. I would also add that I do think race-conscious policies are responsive policies. I am asked about H.R. 40 in community in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District by people of every walk of life, every race and ethnicity, every gender identity and expression, because they are simply people of conscience. I've always said that policy is my love language, and the reason I say that is because the majority of the harms that have been caused, particularly that have been foisted onto Black Americans, were legislated. So if we can legislate hurt and harm, we can legislate justice.
Amen.
We can legislate healing. And we're certainly long overdue. And for those that would say we need to just get over it, that's interesting. When as a nation you are benefiting right now from an economy that was built on the brutalized backs and the indignities and the horrors of chattel slavery and our African ancestors.
Congresswoman, you got emotional when discussing taking up this mantle from Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Can you elaborate on what that means to you personally? And given that this bill has been introduced through generations, are you thinking about new ways to elevate H.R. 40?
Well, I'll in a moment turn it over to the Congresswoman here, but I got emotional because I'm humbled and because I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility. These are unprecedented and deeply consequential times. And I'm also emotional because I just was thinking about the labor of love that H.R. 40 was for Sheila Jackson Lee. As far as what I'll do in this moment, in the same way that I've championed the Equal Rights Amendment and gender equality being enshrined in our Constitution, I'm not afraid of hard fights. I'm not deterred by challenging landscapes because I've always believed that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. And I'm so glad that Congresswoman Summerlee spoke to the advocates and the movement, because we are grateful for the leadership of the lawmakers, the Black history makers who have shepherded and stewarded this. But there is a movement, as Congresswoman Jackson spoke to, that continues to gain momentum throughout the country. So it's not just Black folks that are self-interested in this. This is people of conscience that recognize the power and the necessity of the work of truth and reconciliation and healing. And there is precedent. We have done this for Native American, for Indigenous people. We have done this for Japanese Americans. So when people say, well, my family didn't own slaves, why should I care about this? Well, you know, we were able to do truth, reconciliation, and the work of the reparative work for Japanese Americans. You know, and not everybody played a role in that either. So that is what brings us here today, and I'm excited to do the work of intentional and inclusive movement building and to appeal to people of conscience. Yes.
Thank you all so much for doing this. You mentioned that there are a lot of advocates in the movement who support this work, who are outside partnering with you all in this work. But a lot of folks that I talk to also feel a sense of hopelessness right now. They feel a sense of fear, a sense of anxiety. Could any of you paint a picture of what an America with reparations look like for folks out there who are looking for a vision, something to latch on to give them hope to get through these next 4 years, get through this next season as you all work to advance this piece of legislation?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is a national as well as an international movement. Evanston, Illinois is minority African American, majority white. Our great abolitionists, historical brothers that are coming out today, they're on the same side of history. Amherst, Massachusetts has already started a commission, not exactly an African American town either. So this is happening in 100 localities across the United States. So there are people of goodwill that are rising up. And some people simply don't have the courage to come forward and speak truth to power. Truth is on our side. We come to comfort those that are disturbed and disturb those that are comfortable. truth will be our ally. So that's the side that we're standing on. And this has been international and phenomenon as well. This is written into the Constitution in so many ways in the country of Brazil that had to go through massive land reform after their history of slavery. This has been written into the Constitution for repair in the Constitution in South Africa. This has been written into the Constitution in India to have more diversity, to have more inclusion, to have more equity. And so this is simply we're asking to start the study. We cannot deny our history going forward. And like I said, it took us 246 years to get from 1619 to 1865 after the Civil War is over. It took us 346 years to get from 1619 to 1965 when we had our voting rights fully restored. And now Mr. Trump has blown that away. So we're saying we can't go back any further. And I can't say how proud I am to be working with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. I wanted this bill so bad for myself, but I am even more confident this is in great hands. And I thank the Congresswoman Erica Jackson Lee for having put it in Ayanna Pressley. So I stand beside her, I stand with her. And like I said, this next phase that Ms. Ayanna Pressley is carrying forward started in Evanston. Repair is already being redressed. They've dispersed over $16 million in the city of Evanston, Illinois. And other cities are now being able to model that same sort of legislation. So I thank Robin Simmons and others in Evanston, and they're setting the path, and now other communities are coming forward.
May I say something?
Yes, of course.
Because you asked what should Black people be feeling.
I'll say something.
As we can move forward in advancing this bill and having these discussions and elevating these conversations, Black people in particular know that there is a fight on their behalf. They know that there is healing that is necessary. It is understood. It is appreciated and respected. And they know that there are a cohort of people in Congress and out of Congress who will not let this moment cede to this movement, which is healing for our whole country. Thank you.
And I would just add in terms of, you said, folks are feeling helpless, and I co-sign everything that my eloquent colleagues offered here. I just want to reiterate again, it is so important. I mean, Black people, look, we are magic. We are miracles. We have resilience. We're hardwired. It's in our, our ancestral DNA. But we cannot only do the work of resistance. It is important to advance a vision of another world that we believe that is possible, and we have to name that in order to manifest that. A world where Black boy joy is a rite of passage. A world where Black men grow old. A world where you can be Black and birthing and safe and sacred, and that is a right and not a privilege. A world where we pass on not generational trauma, but generational wealth, health, and Black joy.
That's right.
So we're naming that. So that's what I do think is possible if we dig deep and people of conscience come together and honor the will of the majority of the people who call this country home to do this work of truth, reconciliation, and repair. That's right.
Amen.
Would you like to? Oh, yes, of course.
I just want to thank all of my mother's colleagues. I agree with all of it. And she would say, we may be bowed, but we are not broken. And I just love that health, wealth, and healing, and love, and Black joy. And for my two children, her grandchildren, they need all of those things. Thank you. Thank you.
I think one thing that I would love to share, Ms. Pressley, with the folks gathered here today, this vision that Ms. Pressley illustrated is one that can be real. It can be real. We are standing here in Washington, D.C., where Howard University was built so that Black men and Black women could attend university, because there was a time when they could not. The medical school was developed, as was Meharry, because young Black scientists could not go, and this wasn't 300 years ago, could not go to university to heal folks in their own communities. We're extending a vision of putting together a commission not just to study, but making the record clear that women like Rosa Parks weren't just tired. Women like Rosa Parks, and Rosa Parks herself was an NAACP investigator, investigating the rape of black women by Klansmen. She was a trained organizer and activist, and she created an opportunity along with thousands of other folks across the South to flex our power and our purses. Now, as black history, which is American history, is torn from the pages of K through 12 and from our community colleges and our state and private universities, what we are asking, what we are demanding is the truth. It's the truth, the explanation, and the healing, the process towards a family's life where that young mother knows that she can attend university. That process where that black mother in the rural South knows that she has health care that will strengthen her. That process where that young woman knows that her son will not be beaten and killed by the folks who are sworn to protect him, that we can't go back to a Jim Crow United States. We cannot go back to an apartheid United States. This commission will not only provide recommendations, but will push for public policies on the state, local, and federal level that ensures and enshrines that we are all truly free and that no public or private institution can deny us full participation. You see, this is where we are. This is truly where we are. So that vision of a beautiful life, when we talk about joy, when we talk about a young person who is living in public housing now who doesn't have transportation to their schools, and their mother works 3 jobs and they're truant, and their mother is trying her best to figure out a way forward, this commission will tell our stories and really, truly, hopefully, move to a place where our existence in this country is what is enshrined on the Statue of Liberty, that we are all truly worth dignity, justice, and the opportunity to live a life that is efficacious and brilliant and prosperous. And when we hear Representative Pressley talk, we actually see that that is, in fact, the future. She is that future. She expounds that. She brings us all together as organizers, as did Sheila Jackson Lee, as did Shirley Chisholm, and all of the African American women who came before us. This is a commission that will tell the truth, write the story, and create, again, a real way forward for folks to ensure that their great-grandbabies won't have to live in a segregated north, south, east, or west, that we can all truly have deep opportunities to move forward and to be our very, very best collectively. Thank you, Ms. Pressley.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, yes.
Have you been able to talk with any Republican colleagues who might be able to work together with you on this legislation, or do you have any reason to believe some of them might be on board?
Well, this is a day one in a new, iteration of our advocacy here. So we already have over 70 co-sponsors. I'm going to be working actively to enlist more. And again, I in the same way that I feel voting rights, gender equality, and so many other issues of consequence are not partisan issues. These are simply American issues. And so I will be, I will ask everyone. I will ask everyone.
Going off of that a little bit, can you, obviously this has been reintroduced over the last 30 years. Talk to us just about the challenges that maybe, you have learned about from what Congresswoman Lee, had passed on, who had tried to fight for this over the last 30 years. What challenges do you have to overcome to get to the next step, to get this to the House floor?
Should be the last question.
Sure. Well, first, I think there's an education component that is really essential here, because a lot of people think this is simply about a check being cut and arriving at a number, and that's not what this is. This is a federal commission to examine the lasting legacy and the vestiges of slavery, to develop proposals for reparations for African American descendants of enslaved people. And that commission would be 15 members, 3 members appointed by the President, 3 members appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, 3 members appointed by the President pro tem of the Senate, and then 6 members shall be experts on racial justice, economics, civil rights, reparative justice, and related fields. So I think that's our first priority, is to educate people, because there's a lot of misinformation about what is H.R. 40 and what, again, just the bones and what constitutes it. Secondly, people probably think the chances of this happening are not high. So we have to give them the education about the fact that momentum is on our side, and there are efforts, successful efforts of redress, successful task forces, including in the city of Boston, which is home to the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District. So we have to tell that story, that there is momentum. And then, I think people will say, at a time when they are dismantling and defunding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, let's just unpack what that means, right? Diversity means everybody. So that means Black folks, Latinos, AAPI, disabled people, veterans, rural folk, women. Diversity means everyone, right? So diversity, and equity and opportunity, and an inclusion in the American dream. So if they are working actively to dismantle and to defund diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives across all agencies, that has nothing to do with meritocracy. This is just an attempt to resegregate society. And so if folks are going to be emboldened in white supremacy and in anti-Black policies, I think all the more that we are especially strident in being unapologetically Black and pro-Black and about Black futures. And I'm sure also there'll be other lessons that the many movement leaders who've been a part of this, that I'll learn from them, and we'll integrate that into our strategic approach.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, happy Black History Month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.